All right, welcome to this explainer. I am so thrilled to have you here today because we are looking at something completely fascinating. We're going to explore exactly how bizarrely creative our ancestors were at killing time. You see, history isn't just about dates and battles, it's also about the incredibly strange and frankly unhinged ways everyday people decided to have a little fun. So I want you to just take a second and imagine life without video games. No streaming services, no downloading a book to your tablet, and absolutely no pulling up an explainer like this one to pass the time on a rainy afternoon. What on earth did people do? We modern humans have this baseline of digital entertainment constantly at our fingertips, but our ancestors? Well, they had an entirely different set of tools to cure their boredom. And when I say creative, I mean alarmingly creative. That is exactly what we're digging into today. We are going on a wild ride through history's most unbelievable pastimes. These are real, documented hobbies that sound completely made up, but are 100% verified by history. So get ready, because what people used to do for fun is absolutely going to blow your mind. Okay, let's dive right in. Section 1, Obsessions with the Macabre. You know, you might think humanity's love for gruesome entertainment started with, like, 1980s slasher films or Hollywood monster movies. Actually, not even close. The 19th century, particularly in Victorian England, was intensely, morbidly obsessed with death as a form of high society entertainment. When the richest, most influential members of Victorian high society had expendable income, they didn't just throw regular dinner parties. No, they bought actual ancient mummies, plopped them right in the middle of their living rooms, and invited their friends over for mummy unwrapping parties. Famous surgeons like Thomas Pettigrew were actually renowned for their showmanship in hosting these eloquently eerie soirees. They were literally degrading ancient cadavers in front of a live, cheering audience. It really was like a burlesque show for dusty skeletons. Well, at least until public criticism finally caused the fat to fall out of fashion. But hey, this morbid curiosity wasn't just reserved for wealthy elites in their fancy parlors. In 19th century Paris, they somehow managed to turn the actual city morgue into a booming tourist trap. In 1886, reports of a 4-year-old girl who tragically died from just a bruise on her hand sparked this massive public interest. Throngs of morbidly curious people flocked to the morgue just to see her. And this absolute frenzy completely shifted the morgue from a quiet place meant for identifying the remains of loved ones into a must-see destination for French citizens and British visitors alike. Bodies were quite literally displayed in the morgue windows for days for everyone to gawk at. It was the ultimate, albeit incredibly grim, window shopping, which humorously, or maybe terrifyingly, actually paved the way for modern-day mannequins. Think about the contrast between Victorian consumerism and our own today. During the Industrial Revolution, the emerging middle class suddenly had cash to spend. But they didn't have Funko Pops or Beanie Babies to collect. Instead, they collected these colorful Staffordshire factory porcelain figurines. And the absolute hottest statues to put on your shelf? Infamous murderers. I'm totally serious. The Victorian middle class eagerly bought 6-inch ceramic figures of notorious slashers, like William Corder, who perpetrated the Red Barn murder. Think of it as an edgelord precious moments collection, and they sold like hotcakes. And if collecting murder statues wasn't quite enough for you, they also commissioned headless photographs. This fad was pioneered by Oscar Gustav Raylander back in 1856. Keep in mind, this is the pioneer era, way, way before Adobe Photoshop. To get this effect, skilled artists had to use literal scissors and paste on the original photographic negatives to combine separate images. They created legitimate-looking decapitations entirely in the name of morbid fun. You had to have incredible skill to pull this off seamlessly, and honestly, you probably needed a pretty good explanation for why you had a picture of yourself holding your own severed head right there on your mantle. Right, moving on. Section 2, Spectating Absolute Chaos. So what happens when people get tired of obsessing over the dead? Simple. They pack a lunch and go watch the incredibly dangerous living. Today, Civil War reenactments are a pretty common hobby, but during the actual Battle of Bull Run, the very first land battle of the American Civil War, people went out to witness the real, live combat firsthand. Convinced that the Union forces would rapidly claim victory, locals actually set up picnics near the battlefield. They sat down to enjoy baskets of finger food while cannons were firing. Suffice it to say, treating a bloody military conflict like a leisurely croquet match was a terrible idea. When the actual slaughter got underway, the spectators rushed to escape in utter panic. Roads became completely clogged with broken-down carriages trying to flee the action, resulting in a chaotic retreat that history forever dubbed the Great Skedaddle. And if you thought picnicking at a literal war zone was wild, look at how we treated nuclear weapons. In 1951, the detonation of atomic warheads over the Nevada desert gave birth to atomic tourism. Las Vegas immediately branded itself the country's atomic tourist capital. Showgirls paraded around in mushroom cloud-inspired clothing, bars served up atomic cocktails, and tourists flocked to the desert to watch live nuclear detonations from a quote-unquote safe distance. It was basically like a Disney character breakfast, but with the most terrifying weapon ever constructed by humanity. Fans bought collectible postcards and breathed in crisp lungfuls of radioactive fallout until the Limited Test Ban Treaty in 1963 finally ended above-ground testing. The fad was brief, for sure, but the radiation poisoning certainly lost a lifetime. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Section 3, brutally bizarre sports. Let's shift our energy from just watching chaos to actively participating in it. Because before the NFL, sports felt less like organized athletic competition and way more like a stunt segment on Jackass. Take 12th century mob football, for example. Two massive opposing teams would fight over a pigskin ball. And I mean fight. To get just one single point, you had to score 3 times. I can only imagine the absolute horror show of their injury reports. But the beauty of this brutal chaos, there was basically only one rule: no murdering. What is truly amazing here is that this chaotic precursor to modern football is still played today. Thousands of fans gather in the UK for 2-day-long matches held every single year on Shrove Tuesday and Ash Wednesday. Now, if mob football involves way too much running for your taste, maybe you'd prefer just kicking someone directly in the leg. The first Cotswold Olympic shin-kicking event was held in 1612 by a famed lawyer named Robert Dover. Originally, it was an offshoot of Cotswold wrestling aimed at tripping an opponent, but it quickly evolved into a chaotic tussle of hitting, grabbing, and relentlessly kicking shins until the other guy went down. It's essentially the pastime of little brothers and drunk retirees. It ran for 200 straight years before a brief pause during the English Civil War and was spectacularly revived in 1965. Today, it still has staggering traction, drawing thousands of participants year after year. But wait, what if you're not naturally athletic at all? Don't worry, history's got a sport for you too. It's called gurning. Originating back in 1267 at the Egremont Crab Fair in the UK to celebrate the crab apple harvest season, this is the highly competitive sport of facial gymnastics. Participants push their face through large horse collar, traditionally called a braffen, and contort their features to make the absolute best or worst face possible. And yes, this bizarre event proudly draws the world's best gurners every single September to a small UK town to see who can pull the best gurn. Which brings us to our final section. Section 4, historical status symbols. Because when our ancestors weren't dodging cannons or kicking each other in the shins, they were flexing their immense wealth, status, and sheer audacity in ways that are just hard to comprehend today. Just think about the number 36. This represents the 36 barrels of gunpowder used in Guy Fawkes' infamous 1605 plot to blow up Parliament. To commemorate this event, the people of Ottery St. Mary in England decided that the hottest accessory wasn't jewelry or fancy clothing, but a literal flaming barrel of tar. Originally, they rolled them down the street, but today, giddy participants actually carry these blazing, heavy tar barrels on their backs. It's an explosive, fiery display of historical pride, sort of like a 17th century gender reveal party, just blazing down the middle of the road. Now, what about pets as status symbols? Think about the contrast here between ancient and modern feline enthusiasts. Today, we pamper house cats that might, on a good day, occasionally hunt a toy mouse. But ancient Egyptian royalty, they kept house-trained cheetahs. Because there was no Department of Fish and Wildlife back then, royalty and influential households kept menageries of exotic pets, looking a lot like a Miami Coke baron. They actually used these cheetahs to hunt mice, snakes, and even big game. These large cats were held in such high reverence that they were often buried right alongside their owners. Which honestly proves that the extreme devotion of modern cat lovers really hasn't changed much in thousands of years. And for our last historical flex, water jousting. As the old saying goes, when a sport gets boring, drop it in the water. Believed to date back to ancient Egypt, it was popularized in France around 570 BC entirely to entertain royalty. And the mechanics are absolutely wild. Instead of riding a horse, the jouster stands on a boat driven by oarsmen. No motorboats, just guys rowing right at the opponent on the Saône River to the tune of medieval music, all while the jouster tries to knock them into the drink. It's remarkable how taking a straightforward sport, placing it on a precarious boat, and playing medieval songs in the background turned it into a centuries-old spectacle. It's still proudly practiced today at the St. Louis Festival every August. So we've seen unwrapped mummies, flaming tar barrels, people fleeing active battlefields with picnic baskets, and athletes kicking each other's shins into oblivion. History is endlessly strange and absolutely wonderful. What you should really take away from this is that human creativity, especially when it comes to boredom, knows absolutely no bounds. So I leave you with this final provocative thought to ponder. If you had a time machine and you had to pick just one, which crazy old hobby would you try?